This video covers Key Area 5 of Unit 2 Higher Human Biology. Key Area 5 is the structure and function of arteries, capillaries, and veins. Today we're just going to look at lymphatic systems, so the exchange of materials between tissue fluid and the cells through what's called pressure filtration and the role of the lymphatic vessels. Okay, so what tissue do you think this is shown on the screen? Okay, it is the blood. You can see red blood cells, you can see white blood cells. When we go on later in the course, we'll talk about platelets and other stuff as well. So as I said, we're looking at the exchange of materials between the tissues and the blood. We're going to learn about that in this. So inside the blood, we have those cells we've just talked about. We've got the red blood cells, we've got white blood cells, and we've got little things that allow us to clot called platelets. There's different types of white blood cells, and there's different types of other cells as well. But that all floats in the liquid medium, which is the plasma. Now, without all that stuff in it, the plasma is a watery yellow liquid, and it has all the dissolved substances like glucose, amino acids, some of your respiratory gases, so oxygen and CO2 can dissolve in that to some extent, and you can have your proteins and your ions floating about that as well. With all of that together, we get the blood. So the lymphatic system is different. It's only covered at higher human biology. It's not covered anywhere else in biology in school. So the blood plasma fluid, which leaks into the tissues, is called the tissue fluid. Some of the tissue fluid returns to the blood at the venous end. So if we follow this through, we've got the artery pushing, it takes a corner, and it becomes the capillary bed here. So you see the blood is pushed. The amount of force that comes through from the artery into the capillary, remember the arteries have all this connective tissue and elastic muscle, the capillaries don't have that, so that force pushes the fluid containing all these nutrients and gases and things out into the surrounding area, and that's what forms this tissue fluid. Your plasma proteins and your enzymes and hormones are stuck inside, so there's still some liquid in them, they slug their way through. And what it's saying here is at this end, the venous end, so the arterial goes through capillary to venous end, some of the liquid that was pushed out through pressure filtration is now able to diffuse back in and join the remaining plasma. And then it can travel around the venous return system and get back to your heart through the vena cava, superior and inferior. But not all of the fluid that goes into tissues comes back into the venous end. So the endothelial lining in the central lumen of blood vessels is surrounded by a layer of tissue. So the blood pressure forces the fluid part of the blood along the small soluble molecules out of the capillaries and into the tissue fluid. This is pressure filtration. Red blood cells and large proteins are not able to do this, so they're left in the vessels and the plasma. Cells exchange molecules with the tissue fluid by diffusion. So this allows the fluid from the blood in this plasma to get so much closer to all the cells of your peripheral tissues and really get in there. Tissue fluid supplies the cells with glucose, oxygen, other substances, and it picks up carbon dioxide and other metabolic wastes which diffuse out the cells into the tissue fluid. Much of the tissue fluid, as we've said, is able to return to the blood, but not all of it is. So this is just a table to compare in the plasma, so that's in the blood vessel, got more protein, in the tissue fluid less, got your red blood cells and white blood cells in the plasma. If you remember, as part of the immune inflammatory response, we had our cytokines widening the capillary net and allowing the white blood cells out. Less fat in the plasma, more in the tissue fluid. Quite often this is a question that comes up in exams. We get the osmotic return. This again is just showing pressure filtration and then the osmotic return. We then look a little bit at the lymphatic system. So the fluid that doesn't return to the blood is the lymph, and it's collected by the lymphatic system. The lymph travels under low pressure to enter the main circulation just above the heart. It doesn't have a pump at all. As you contract your muscles, it's like the vein in that as you contract your biceps, the veins and lymph valves lymph vessels underneath the skeletal muscles will be compressed, and that will squish the fluid further. Just like veins, we have valves in the lymph vessels. So again, this, for example, if you compress your arms just now and you bend your arms up, your biceps will contract, and that will squish all of the venous and lymphatic fluid that's underneath your bicep up. And then when you relax, it tries to fall down, but it hits a valve and is not able to do so. That's really it. There's a little bit extra here just for interest. So edema is accumulation of tissue fluid between the cells and capillaries, and certain medical conditions can cause this to happen. Things like high blood pressure, so tissue fluid is pushed by pressure filtration faster into your tissues, then it can be reabsorbed either through the venous or lymphatic. Malnutrition, heart conditions as well can cause edema. Certain parts of heart failure can cause it as well. And then again, this is just a video showing tissue fluid being formed through pressure filtration and it being absorbed. So you could try and draw a diagram to show the exchange of materials in the capillary bed, so referencing things like tissue fluid, plasma, where diffusion is happening, where fluid would come back into the venous system at the other end of the capillaries, and where it would be absorbed by the lymph vessels. You can talk about what lymph fluid is. You can name substances that pass from the body cells into the lymph fluid and describe ways that tissue fluid returns to the bloodstream. You could describe the means by which the lymph is forced along, so pressure filtration from arterial pressure, and the structures that prevent the backflow of lymph in the lymphatic system. So these are the veins. You could then look at things like elephantitis, which is quite often caused by parasites, and you could look at edema. So this is just the answers to a lot of these questions. Okay, this is just a very brief what you should know. Hopefully you've got the basics out of this. You understand pressure filtration causing the plasma to pass through the capillary walls into the fluid-filled area around the cells. That tissue fluid is supplying all the good things, your glucose and oxygen, and absorbing all the wastes. Some of it is able to get back into the venous return, but a lot of it is absorbed by the lymphatic vessels. And the tissue fluid and blood plasma are similar in composition, with the exception of plasma proteins, which are too large to be filtered through the capillary walls. So again, as always, keep up with your notes in the booklet and keep up with your own summary notes. Have a go at the Google Forms and ask any questions if you are stuck.